The whispers were the first sign. They were like mice in the walls of a house you thought was safe. You can't quite see them, but you can feel their frantic, unseen movement just at the edge of your perception. I was standing in line at the grocery store, a carton of milk in my hand, when I felt the first tremor. Two women behind me, their conversation a low murmur, suddenly fell silent as I shifted my weight. When I glanced back, they looked away too quickly, their eyes wide with a shared secret knowledge. My stomach, already a delicate ecosystem of hormonal turmoil, tightened into a cold, hard knot. It had started. The story was out, but it wasn't the right story. I paid for my milk, my movements precise and controlled, and walked out into the bright, indifferent afternoon. I felt like I was moving through water. Every passerby seemed to be looking at me, their gazes lingering on my midsection, which was still flat beneath my deliberately loose-fitting sweater. In their eyes, I saw it all: pity, judgment, a delicious second-hand scandal. I saw a woman with a secret, a shameful secret. And I knew with a certainty that was as cold and sharp as a shard of glass, that my sister Serafina was the one who had told them. The decision, the real one, had been made 6 months ago on a rainy Tuesday in my parents' living room. It was a day like any other, which is to say it was quiet and heavy with the things they never said. For 20 years, my parents' marriage had been a loving, devoted partnership, but the house itself held a deep and abiding sorrow, a grief for the children they couldn't have, a grief that had settled into the very bones of the place. I remembered the long years of it, the hushed clinical language of infertility that I learned as a child. Follicles, viability, liplantation, the hushed phone calls, the strained trips to the clinic. I remember being 12 and finding my mother weeping in the laundry room, holding a single, tiny, knitted baby booty someone had gifted her at a shower she shouldn't have attended. I didn't understand the specifics then, only the crushing weight of her despair. She saw my questioning eyes, wiped her tears, and told me she was just feeling tired. She was always just feeling tired. My sister Serafina experienced our parents' grief differently. To her, it was an inconvenience, a social embarrassment, a permanent cloud of gloom that interfered with her own bright, shining existence. Sira, who was 2 years older than me, moved through life with a sense of effortless entitlement. She was beautiful, charismatic, the kind of person who could walk into any room and make it her own. She saw our parents' sadness as a weakness, a tedious drama she had no time for. While I learned to read the silence in our house, Sira simply turned up the volume on her own life, drowning it out with parties, friends, ambition. They had tried everything, of course. Rounds and rounds of IVF, each one a grueling, expensive, and ultimately heartbreaking cycle of hope and failure. There had been 2 pregnancies that made it to the 8-week mark. 2 tiny, flickering heartbeats on a screen that were extinguished before they could ever truly begin. After the last miscarriage, something in my father, a strong, quiet man, seemed to break. He never spoke of it, but he stopped working in his garden. The roses he had so meticulously tended grew wild and tangled. The house grew quieter still. They were in their late 40s then. They officially gave up. They accepted their fate. But I never did. The idea took root in me slowly, a seed planted years ago that I hadn't even known was there. I watched them grow into their 50s, loving and devoted to Sarah and me, but always with that faint, hollow ache behind their eyes. The ache for the child they never got to hold. I was 28, healthy, with a stable career as an architectural archivist. My life was my own. I realized there was a gift I could give them, a gift no one else could dot. So I went to their house on that rainy Tuesday. I found them in the living room, reading. The silence was comfortable, but still heavy. "Mom, Dad?" I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud. They looked up, their expressions of mild surprise shifting to concern at the seriousness on my face. I sat on the ottoman across from them. I didn't know how to start, so I just began. I have spent my entire life watching you both, I said, my hands twisting in my lap. I've watched how much love you have to give. And I've watched how much it has hurt you not to have. More family. My mother's face tightened. Kaylin, darling, you and Sarah are more than enough. I know, I said softly, but I also know the truth. And I can't stand to watch you hurt anymore. I've been thinking about this for a very long time. Spoken to doctors, I've done the research. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I want to be your surrogate. I want to have your baby. For you. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped turning. My father stared at me, his book forgotten in his lap, his face pale with shock. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was something else. It's a mixture of love and horror. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. Absolutely not. Kaylin, we could never ask you to do that, to put your body through that, to put your life on hold. No, you're not asking, I said, my own voice gaining strength. I am offering. This is not a sacrifice, Mom. It's a solution. It's the one thing in the world I can do to give you back the joy that was stolen from you. Please, just think about it. It took them 2 months to agree. It's 2 months of long, difficult conversations. They were terrified for me, for my health, for my future. But beneath their fear, I saw the undeniable, flickering ember of hope I had ignited. The quiet in their house began to change. It was no longer heavy with grief. It was humming with a fragile, terrifying possibility. Finally, they agreed, on one condition: absolute secrecy. My mother couldn't bear the thought of the world knowing, of the questions, the judgment. And she couldn't bear the thought of another public heartbreak. If something went wrong, we would tell no one. Not our extended family, not our friends, and especially not Serafina. My mother knew her other daughter too well. Sarah wouldn't understand this, Kaylin, she had said, her voice filled with a sad resignation. She would see it as drama. She would make it about herself. We will tell her when the baby is here, safe in our arms, not before. I agreed. The secret became a sacred trust between the three of us. The process began with a clinical, detached precision that suited my analytical mind. There were contracts to be signed, psychological evaluations to pass, and a seemingly endless gauntlet of medical appointments. My body became a project, a vessel to be managed. I started the hormone injections, grimly jabbing needles into my own thigh every evening. My bathroom counter looking like a miniature pharmacy. The physical toll was immediate. I was exhausted, constantly bloated, my emotions a turbulent sea. I had to navigate with a stoic-faced calm. The detachment I had cultivated my whole life became my greatest defense. I observed the symptoms as if they were happening to someone else. Subject reports fatigue and nausea. Mood is highly variable. This is where my best friend Tess became my lifeline. She was the one person, besides my parents and the doctors, that I had decided to tell. I needed an anchor, someone outside the emotional vortex of my family. Tess, a practical, no-nonsense geology professor, was that anchor. She listened without judgment, her solid presence a comfort in the sterile waiting rooms of the fertility clinic. "You're a goddamn superhero, you know that?" she said one afternoon as we sat in a coffee shop after one of my appointments. I had just had the embryo transfer, a strange, painless procedure that had left me feeling profoundly disconnected from my own body. 2 weeks later, a blood test confirmed it. I was pregnant. "I don't feel like a superhero," I'd murmured, staring into my cup of decaf coffee. "I feel like a science experiment." "Well, you're a successful one," she'd said, with a small smile. "How are the folks?" "A wreck," I admitted. "They're so hopeful, it's terrifying. My mom calls me 3 times a day to ask if I'm feeling okay. My dad has started working in the garden again." The weight of their hope was heavier than any physical symptom. thought of something going wrong, of letting them down, was a constant low-level hum of anxiety as the weeks turned into the first trimester. The secrecy became a suffocating blanket. I started wearing baggy sweaters and loose-fitting dresses. I turned down invitations for drinks with colleagues, citing a perpetual headache. My world began to shrink, and Serafina began to notice. Her calls became more frequent, her questions more pointed. "You've been so distant lately, Kaylin. Is everything okay?" Her concern was a thin veneer over her insatiable curiosity. My privacy was a puzzle she was determined to solve. She dropped by my apartment unannounced one Saturday, catching me on the sofa, pale and exhausted from a bout of morning sickness. I was wearing a shapeless, oversized sweatshirt. Her eyes raked over me, a flicker of something calculating in her gaze. "You look tired," she'd said, her voice laced with a sweet false sympathy. "Are you sure you're not feeling sick?" "I'm fine, Sierra," I said, forcing a smile. "Just busy with work." She didn't believe me. I knew because she started her campaign of quiet interrogation with our mutual friends. "Have you seen Kaylin lately? She seems so secretive. Do you think she's dating someone?" She was hunting for a story. And since I wasn't providing one, she began to write her own. The direct confrontation happened at the end of my 14th week. The risk of miscarriage had dropped significantly. My parents and I were just beginning to breathe, to believe this might actually be real. Sierra cornered me in the kitchen during a Sunday family dinner at their house. "I know something's going far." "On Kaylin," she said, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of righteous concern. "You can tell me? Who is he? Did you get yourself into some kind of trouble?" The implication was clear. In her mind, the only reason a woman like me would be secretive and tired was a man. A sordid affair. An accidental, shameful pregnancy. Her mind went straight to the most scandalous, most dramatic possibility. Bound by my promise to our parents, I couldn't tell her the beautiful, complicated truth. "It's a private matter, Sierra," I said, my voice firm. "Please, just leave it alone." Her face hardened. My refusal to confide in her was, I realized, a deeper insult to her than any secret I could possibly be keeping. 'Twas a rejection, and Serafina did not handle rejection well. My privacy became her obsession. My secret became her weapon. She chose her moment perfectly. Our grandmother's 90th birthday party. The entire extended family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, a whole audience for her grand performance. The party was at a beautiful old restaurant in a private dining room filled with flowers and laughter. My parents, for the first time, in a long time, looked genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. The toasts began after dinner. One by one, people stood to share a memory of my grandmother. Then Serafina stood up, a glass of champagne in her hand, a practiced, sorrowful look on her beautiful face. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Not just to Nana, but to family, to all of us, because family is there for you, especially when you're going through a difficult time. When you're carrying a heavy burden." She turned her eyes to me, and I felt a sudden, cold dread. "A burden you feel you have to carry alone," she continued, her voice dripping with pity. "And so I want to toast my brave, strong sister, Kaylin." Every eye in the room swiveled. To me, I sat frozen, a deer in the headlights of her malicious generosity. "I know you didn't want anyone to know," she said softly, as if sharing an intimate secret with 30 people. "But we're your family. We love you. And we're not here to judge you. We are here to support you." She raised her glass. "So let's toast to Kaylin. And to the secret she's been carrying, to her secret pregnancy. We love you, Kaylin. And we will love your baby, no matter who the father is." The silence that followed was a physical blow. It was filled with the sound of indrawn breaths, the soft gasps of my aunts, the sudden, intense, judgmental weight of 24 pairs of eyes on me. I saw my mother's face, the color draining from it, her hand flying to her mouth, not to stifle a gasp of surprise, but one of pure horror. I saw my father's happy expression shatter, replaced by a look of such profound devastation that it cracked my heart. Serafina was still standing there, smiling her sad, triumphant smile. She thought she had just performed a brave act of familial love, of bringing a shameful secret into the light so it could be healed. She thought she had cornered me, exposed me, and made herself the hero of the story. She had no idea what she had truly done. She had no idea that the secret wasn't mine to keep. She had just taken my parents' most fragile, precious hope and thrown it to the wolves, turning an act of profound love into a tawdry public scandal. I looked at her triumphant, pitying face, and the cold, detached calm I had wrapped myself in for months, finally, irrevocably shattered. And in its place, something new and terrible began to grow. A quiet, focused, and utterly unforgiving rage. The show was just beginning, and I would be the one to write its final act. The silence that fell over the private dining room was a physical thing, a pressure against my eardrums, a vacuum that sucked all the air and warmth from the space. 30 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, a constellation of judgment, pity, and shocked curiosity. In that moment, I was no longer Kaylin, the quiet archivist, the reliable daughter. I was a spectacle, a scandal, a story to be whispered over phone calls and coffee for weeks to come. Serafina remained standing, bathed in the warm ambient light, her glass still raised. Her face was a perfect mask of loving concern, but I could see the glint of triumph. In her eyes, she had done it. She had seized control of the family narrative, casting herself as the brave heroine and me as the fallen woman in need of her saving grace. My mother's hand, trembling, found mine under the table. My father's face was granite, his jaw so tight I was afraid his teeth might crack. They weren't looking at me. We're both staring at Serafina, their expressions a mirrored agony of betrayal. They weren't ashamed of me. They were horrified, for me and for the beautiful, fragile secret their other daughter had just grotesquely disemboweled and displayed for public consumption. My analytical mind, my greatest shield, took over. It processed the scene not as a trauma, but as a strategic problem. Variable 1, 30 stunned relatives. Variable 2, 1 narcissistic antagonist. Variable 3, 2 devastated parents. Objective: damage control. Exit strategy required. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. To engage with Serafina on her chosen battlefield would be to validate her drama, to accept the premise of her attack. So I simply rose to my feet, my movements fluid and unhurried. The room held its collective breath. I looked at my sister, my expression a blank wall she could not read. "Thank you for your concern, Serafina," I said, my voice quiet, yet it cut through the silence with surgical precision. "You've given us all a great deal to think about." I then turned to my grandmother, who looked profoundly confused. "Happy birthday, Nana. I love you." And then I turned my back on all of them. I walked to my parents, who were frozen in their chairs. I placed a hand on my mother's shoulder and one on my father's. "Let's go home," I whispered. It was an act of quiet command that broke the spell. My father stood immediately, his chair scraping back harshly. My mother rose with him, her eyes still fixed on Serafina with a look of terrible, wounded disbelief. I led them out of the room, past the stunned faces of my cousins and the open-mouthed shock of my aunts. I didn't look back. I left Serafina standing alone in the center of the stage she had built, the star of a play whose other main characters had just walked out. The car ride home was a rolling cathedral of silence. My father drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, his gaze fixed on the road with an intensity that felt dangerous. My mother sat in the passenger seat, her body rigid, staring out at the blurred city lights. A single silent tear traced the path down her cheek. I sat in the back, the architect of this entire situation, feeling a responsibility so immense, it was a physical weight on my chest. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the things we couldn't say. My father's rage was a palpable force, a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the car's frame. My mother's sorrow was a quiet, suffocating fog. My own emotions were a turbulent storm locked behind a dam of calculated calm. My anger was a cold, clean fire. But my primary feeling was a fierce, protective love for the two people in the front seat. Serafina had not just attacked me, she had attacked them. She had attacked their hope. Halfway home, my mother finally spoke, her voice a ragged whisper. How could she? She asked the window, the city lights. How could she do that too? You, Kaylin, in front of everyone, to make it sound so sordid. She doesn't know the truth, Mom, I said softly. She wrote the ugliest story she could imagine because she couldn't conceive of a beautiful one. My father said nothing, but I saw his knuckles go white on the steering wheel. He understood. Syrah's cruelty wasn't just in the exposure. It was in the cheap, tawdry motive she had assigned to my condition. She had taken an act of profound sacrificial love and painted it as a tramp's backly mistake. When we arrived at their house, my mother hugged me tightly at the door. You're staying here tonight, she said. It wasn't a question. I don't want you to be alone. Agreed. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, the quiet of the house a comfort. But I knew the war had just begun. Serafina had fired the first shot in a public square. The shrapnel would take time to land. The calls began the next morning. A relentless fusillade. My phone, my parents' phones. It was the extended family. A buzzing hive of curiosity, now activated by the drama. My Aunt Carol was the first to get through to me. Kaylin, dear, she began, her voice oozing a concerned, syrupy tone that set my teeth on edge. Serafina told us what happened. I just want you to know we're all here for you. You don't have to go through this alone. Is there anything we can do? Do you need money? The condescension was breathtaking. In the space of a single evening, I had been transformed from a competent, independent woman into a charity case. A problem to be managed. Thank you, Carol, but I'm fine, I said. My voice clipped. It's a private matter. Course, dear. Of course, she said, though I knew she would report back to the others that I was being defensive. And in denial, my parents and I had agreed on our strategy. A united front of polite, impenetrable stonewalling. To every aunt, uncle, and cousin who called, the answer was the same. Thank you for your concern. This is a private family. Matter we are handling internally. Kaylin has our full and unconditional love and support. Our refusal to feed the beast only made it hungrier. Serafina, meanwhile, was conducting a masterful PR campaign. I saw the evidence in the texts I received from my younger cousins. Hey, Kaylin, just wanted to check in. Sarah is so worried about you. She feels awful about how it all came out, but she said she just couldn't stand by and watch you suffer in silence. She's a really good sister, a good sister. She was painting herself as the family saint, the one brave enough to lance the boil of my shameful secret. She was building a narrative, casting herself as the protagonist, and I, by my silence, was letting her. Every refusal to engage, every polite no comment was twisted into further proof of my guilt, my shame, my instability. She was winning. For now, on the third day, I met Tess for coffee. I needed my anchor. I needed the one person I could speak to without a filter. We found a small, quiet cafe. And I recounted the entire sordid affair of the birthday party. Tess listened, her expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, she stared into her mug for a long moment. She gave you a Judas kiss. Tess said, her voice low and furious. She hugged you with a knife in her hand. That wasn't an intervention, Kaylin. That was a public execution. A hit job. It was effective, I admitted, feeling the exhaustion of the past few days wash over me. The entire family now looks at me like I'm some tragic fallen woman, and they see her as the brave, compassionate one who tried to save me. So, what's the plan? Tess asked, her practical mind cutting straight to the point. When are you calling a family meeting, dropping the truth bomb and watching her spontaneously combust from the sheer humiliation? Because I will buy front row tickets for that. I shook my head. Not yet, I said. The plan had been forming in the back of my mind. A cold, clear, strategic response solidifying out of the emotional chaos. What do you mean, not yet? Tess demanded. You can't let her get away with this. I have no intention of letting her get away with it, I said, a chill in my own voice that surprised me. But if I tell the truth now, while the gossip is fresh, it will just look like I'm scrambling to create a more palatable story. It will be messy. It will be more drama. It will turn my parents' beautiful, fragile hope into another round of ugly family warfare. They've had enough of that. They deserve peace. They deserve to enjoy this pregnancy without it being a spectacle. I leaned forward. Serafina has built herself a very tall, very shiny pedestal of moral superiority. She's standing on it, telling everyone what a good, loving sister she is and how tragic her wayward sister has become. I'm going to let her. I'm going to let her keep building it. I'm going to let her add layers of lies and fake concern and self-congratulation. I'm going to let her climb so high that everyone in the family has to crane their necks to admire her. Tess stared at me, her brow furrowed. And then what? And then, I said, a cold smile touching my lips, at a time and place of my choosing, when she is at the absolute pinnacle of her performance. I'm going to kick the pedestal out from under her. The fall will be so much more satisfying than if I just pushed her off now. Tess was silent for a moment, then she let out a low whistle. You're terrifying, she said, a slow, admiring smile spreading across her face. I love it. My resolve, now affirmed, felt like a suit of armor. So when Serafina showed up at my apartment a week later, I was ready. She came bearing a pot of organic tea and an expression of profound saintly concern. She was here to save me from myself. I know you're angry at me, she began as I let her in, her voice soft and placating. But I did it because I love you, Kaylin. I couldn't bear to see you so alone and secretive. You can talk to me. You can tell me who he is. Is he married? Does he not want to be involved? We can handle this. Dad and I can get our lawyers. So I was already planning my life, my shameful secret life. She was the manager of my crisis. There is no he, Sira, I said, my voice calm. I sat on my sofa, not huddled, but upright and composed. I did not look like a woman in crisis. This visibly annoyed her. Don't lie to me, she said, her frustration starting to fray the edges of her concerned facade. You're nearly 4 months pregnant. I'm not an idiot. You have to start thinking practically about the baby. Have you thought about adoption? There are wonderful families who... I am not giving my baby up for adoption, I said, the words tasting strange on my tongue. My baby. It was both true and false. A complicated, beautiful lie of omission. Fine, she huffed, her patience gone. She stood up and began pacing my living room, her arms waving. Then you have to be prepared. Are you even financially stable enough for this? A single mother? It's not easy, Kaylin. Your job is so niche. You need a real plan. Have you even seen an OB/GYN? You need to be taking prenatal vitamins. Every word was a judgment wrapped in a layer of fake concern. She saw me as incompetent, promiscuous, and foolish. A mess that she, the capable and superior sister, had to clean up. My health, my finances, and my plans are all in order, I said evenly. And they are none of your business. Her face flushed with anger. My calm was infuriating her. She needed my tears, my confessions, my drama. That was the currency she dealt in. My refusal to provide it was rendering her powerless. Fine, finally spat, her voice shrill. Be that way. Suffer in silence. Wallow in your secret shame. I was only trying to help you. God, you're so ungrateful. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the organic tea she'd brought sitting untouched on the coffee table. The confrontation had not shaken me. It had clarified everything. She had just shown me her entire hand. She saw me as a tragedy and herself as a savior, and she would continue to play that role for anyone who would listen. Later that evening, I walked over to the calendar hanging in my kitchen. My eyes scanned the weeks ahead. I saw the appointment for my 20-week anatomy scan, the milestone that would confirm the baby's health. And then I saw the date a few weeks after that. It's a big red circle. Mom and Dad, 35th anniversary. They were planning a party. It's a large one. The first they had thrown in years. A celebration not just of their marriage, but of the hope that had been reignited in their lives. All the family would be there. Everyone who had heard Sira's story. Everyone who had watched me with pity and judgment. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Serafina had chosen her stage. It's a restaurant now. I had chosen mine. The weeks following my grandmother's birthday party bled into one another in a slow, tense crawl. A new, toxic normal settled over our family. The lie Serafina had so publicly birthed took on a life of its own. It's growing stronger and more detailed with every gossiping phone call between my aunts and cousins. I became a character in a story she was writing. Kaylin, the tragic one. So smart, but so foolish with men. Hiding a secret pregnancy, too proud and stubborn to accept help. My parents and I became a silent, isolated island. We continued the tradition of Sunday dinner, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken things. Serafina would attend, her presence a loud, disruptive performance of concern. She'd bring me things, a book on natural childbirth, a ridiculously expensive organic nipple cream, a pamphlet for a single mother support group, which she would leave on the kitchen counter with a theatrical casualness. Each item was a prop in her play, a testament to her loving, practical nature in the face of my chaotic irresponsibility. My parents treated her with a polite, glacial coldness that was far more damning than any argument would have been. They spoke to her only when necessary. They answered her questions about their health or the weather in monosyllables. They built a wall of quiet disappointment around her, a wall she seemed completely unable or unwilling to see. She mistook their pained silence for tacit approval of her role as the family's new caretaker. I, in turn, learned to exist in a state of dual consciousness. In my work at the archive, I was myself, focused, competent, analytical. I found a strange comfort in the dusty, quiet order of the past, in the clean lines of old blueprints and the precise language of historical documents. It was a world that made sense, but outside of work, I was playing a part. I wore baggy, shapeless clothes. I mastered the art of the vague, evasive answer. My life became a fortress of secrets, and the pregnancy, my body slow, magnificent. Transformation was the most heavily guarded secret of all. The 20-week anatomy scan was a critical milestone. A day circled in red on my calendar and my parents'. This was the appointment that would confirm the baby's health. That would count every tiny finger and toe. That would measure the chambers of a heart the size of a thumbnail. My mother insisted on coming with me. My father, claiming he had to work, confessed to me later that he was simply too nervous to attend. The memory of past ultrasounds, of flickering screens, and the terrible, gentle silence from a doctor about to deliver bad news was a ghost he could not face. The waiting room of the perinatal clinic was a cheerful, sun-drenched space filled with round bellies and nervous, excited partners. Couples sat holding hands, flipping through parenting magazines, their faces alight with a simple, uncomplicated joy. My mother and I sat apart from them, our own joy a fragile, guarded thing. She clutched her purse in her lap, her knuckles white. She was trying so hard to be calm. But her hope was so immense it was nearly indistinguishable from fear. A technician with kind eyes called my name. Kaylin Renault. In the dim, quiet room, I lay on the examination table, my sweater pulled up, the cold gel a shock against my skin. My mother sat in a chair beside me, her eyes fixed on the dark screen. The technician moved the transducer over my belly, and the static resolved into a grainy, black and white world. And there it was, a life, a perfect, moving, living being. I watched, my breath caught in my throat. My analytical mind tried to keep its distance, to observe this as a biological process. There is the femur. Its length is within the 90th percentile. There is the four-chambered heart, beating at 145 beats per minute. But then, the technician shifted the angle, and a tiny, perfectly formed hand floated into view. Its fingers unfurling like a flower blooming in fast motion. A sound escaped my lips, a soft gasp. A flash of emotion so raw, so powerful, it ambushed me completely. It was a fierce, protective, overwhelming love. A love for this child that was a part of me and not a part of me. A child I was nurturing and protecting not for myself, but for the two people I loved most in the world. This was not a project. This was not a science experiment. This was a person, a grandson, my brother, a miracle. I turned my head and saw my mother. Tears were streaming down her face, silent and unchecked. But these were not the tears of grief I had seen so many times before. These were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She was seeing her son, her healthy, living son. Her hand reached out and found mine, her grip fierce and certain. In that dim, quiet room, surrounded by the cool hum of medical equipment, the weight of 20 years of sorrow finally began to lift. "He's perfect," the technician said, smiling. "Everything looks absolutely perfect. Perfect." The word echoed in the room. It was the word my parents had almost given up on ever hearing. Serafina, meanwhile, was growing bolder. Passive acceptance of her narrative had emboldened her. She decided my quiet denial was a cry for help. She decided I was not just ashamed, but also incompetent and unprepared. So she took it upon herself to act. She announced via a tasteful, expensive-looking evite sent to the entire extended family and a handful of my own friends, that she was throwing me a surprise baby shower. The invitation was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive martyrdom. "Let's come together and shower our dear Kaylin with love and support, as she bravely embarks on the beautiful journey of motherhood alone. Let's make sure she and her little one have everything they need. Your presence is the only gift required, but a contribution to a secure future for the baby would mean the world." She had included a link to a registry she had created in my name, filled with the most expensive, top-of-the-line baby gear imaginable. She was not just throwing me a party. She was fundraising for my perceived incompetence. Positioning herself as the generous benefactor of my tragic life, it was a brilliant, vicious, strategic move. It backed me into a corner. If I refused to attend my own baby shower, I would look unstable, ungrateful, and deeply troubled, confirming every rumor she had spread. If I attended, I would be forced to sit for 3 hours as the guest of honor at my own public shaming. Accepting gifts for a life I was not going to live. All under her benevolent, pitying gaze. Tess was apoplectic when I told her, "You can't. Go. Absolutely not. Feign illness, leave town. It's not a party, Kaylin. It's a public flogging where they hand you presents afterwards." "I have to go," I told her calmly over the phone. I was looking at the invitation on my computer screen at the smiling professional photo of Sira she had included at the bottom. "Why?" Tess demanded. "Because she's overplaying her hand," I explained. "She's so confident in her story, so convinced of her own righteousness, that she's becoming reckless. This party, it's for her. It's for her. It's her coronation as the family saint. And I need to be there to watch her place the crown on her own head. I need everyone to see it. You're letting her build the gallows even higher, Tess said, a note of grudging admiration in her voice. Exactly, I said. I want her to have the grandest stage possible. It will make her fall that much more spectacular. The baby shower was held in Seraphine's immaculate, minimalist penthouse apartment, which she had decorated in a riot of pastel balloons and streamers. It felt like a child's birthday party thrown by someone who had never met a child. 30 women aunts, cousins. A few of my bewildered friends whom Sarah had invited without my knowledge were crammed into the living room. Sipping champagne while I drank water, I played my part. I wore a simple, elegant maternity dress in a soft blue. I was serene, I was gracious. I smiled until my face ached. My composure was a weapon she hadn't anticipated. I could see the frustration in her eyes every time she looked at me. I was not the weeping, broken mess she had expected. I was ruining her performance by refusing to play my assigned role. I sat in a large, throne-like chair as she directed a mountain of gifts to be piled at my feet. A ridiculously expensive stroller system. A crib made of imported birchwood. Designer baby clothes. With every gift I opened, I would say, "Thank you, Aunt Carol. That's so thoughtful. Cousin Marie, it's beautiful." My parents were. They're standing in a corner, their faces strained but supportive. They were playing their parts too. The climax of the event was Sarah's speech. She stood before the crowd, her hand resting on my shoulder. A gesture of patronizing intimacy. "I just want to say how proud I am of my little sister," she began, her voice thick with emotion. When I first learned about her situation, I was worried. But seeing her here today, surrounded by so much love, I know she's going to be an amazing mother. She has chosen a difficult path, an unconventional one, but she is facing it with so much bravery. The room was wrapped. My aunts were dabbing their eyes. She was magnificent. "And I want you to know, Kaylin," she said, looking down at me, her eyes shining, "that I will always be here for you, for both of you. You are not alone in this." The room erupted in applause for her. For her grace, her compassion, her incredible sisterly devotion. She took a small, modest bow. Later, as the party was winding down, I saw my father corner her by the kitchen. I was too far away to hear the words, but I saw his expression. It was calm, but as cold and hard as a glacier. He spoke to her for no more than 30 seconds. Her confident, smiling facade dissolved. The color drained from her face, replaced by a look of shocked, frightened indignation. He had drawn a line. He had delivered a warning. The quiet, gentle man had finally shown his teeth. That night, my parents helped me load the mountain of gifts into my car. We would store them in their basement for later. As my mother said with a knowing look, the car was silent on the drive to my apartment. I was not angry. I was not humiliated. I was content. Serafina had played her strongest card. She had cemented her narrative. In the eyes of our family, she was the selfless protector, and I was the fortunate charity case. The stage was now perfectly set. A week later, the embossed invitations for my parents' 35th wedding anniversary party arrived in the mail. The event was just a few weeks away. It would be at the country club, a large, formal affair. Everyone who had been at the baby shower and more would be there. I stood in my bedroom in front of the full-length mirror. I was 25 weeks. Pregnant now, my belly a firm, proud curve that could no longer be hidden. I placed a hand on it, feeling the faint, fluttering kick of the little life inside. My son, my brother, my parents' gift. I looked at my own reflection. My face was calm. My eyes were clear. The waiting was almost over. The long, quiet war of whispers and lies was about to reach its conclusion. Serafina had thrown a lovely party for my shame. I was about to throw a magnificent one for my truth. The month leading up to my parents' anniversary party was the final, quiet stretch of a long and brutal siege. My pregnancy was no longer a secret that could be hidden beneath a loose sweater. It was a physical fact, a gentle, curving reality that I carried with me everywhere. And so, the whispers that had followed, me in the grocery store aisles, turned into stares of open, unabashed curiosity. The family's pity, once delivered through concerned phone calls, was now administered in person with suffocating gestures of condescension. My Aunt Carol, upon seeing me at a cafe, would rush over to insist on carrying my single handbag as if it were a bag of bricks. My cousins would speak to me in a slow, gentle voice, as though pregnancy had rendered me intellectually fragile. They would ask if I was keeping my spirits up, and if I had looked into government assistance programs. Each interaction was a fresh layer of varnish on the masterpiece of my public disgrace. A masterpiece painted by my sister. I moved through it all like a visitor from another planet. An anthropologist observing the strange rituals of a tribe she did not belong to. I accepted their help with a serene, enigmatic smile. My composure was my shield. My silence was my sword. It unnerved them. They had a script for how a ruined woman should behave, and I refused to read my lines. Serafina, meanwhile, was at the absolute zenith of her reign. She had fully embraced her role as the family's compassionate matriarch in waiting. At our 10 Sunday dinners, she would arrive bearing organic prenatal vitamins she'd researched for me, or a stack of books on attachment parenting. She would direct all conversation about the situation to my parents, speaking about me in the third person as if I were a delicate, unstable patient. We need to start thinking about a childcare plan for after the baby arrives. She would say to my father, her voice filled with practical authority, Kaylin will need to go back to work, obviously, and a good daycare has a waiting list a mile long. I've taken the liberty of compiling a spreadsheet of the best-rated facilities in her neighborhood. My parents would listen, their faces impassive, and offer non-committal grunts. Thank you for your diligence, Serafina. We'll look at it. Her inability to provoke a reaction from us, to draw us into her drama, only fueled her efforts. She saw our quiet unity not as a sign of strength, but as a symptom of our collective shock and denial. She was the only clear-headed one, the only one thinking practically, and she was determined to save us all. I spoke to Tess on the phone almost every day. She was my strategist, my co-conspirator, my sole connection to a reality where I was not seen as a walking tragedy. She's drafting spreadsheets now. Tess howled with laughter after I recounted the latest Sunday dinner. Oh, this is better than I could have ever imagined. She's not just building a pedestal, Kaylin. She's building a multi-story monument to her own magnificent ego. It's getting harder to breathe up there on her high horse, I said. The air is getting thin. Good, Tess said, her voice turning serious. Let her get dizzy. Let her feel completely secure. Are you ready for this party? I'm ready, I said, and I was. The waiting had sharpened my resolve to a razor's edge. A few days before the party, on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, my parents asked me to come over. When I arrived, my father was out, and my mother led me upstairs. She opened the door to the room at the end of the hall, the room that had been a guest room, a storage room, a sewing room, a room of forgotten things for 30 years. It was a nursery. It had been transformed. The walls were painted a soft, gentle sage green. A simple, elegant crib of light oak stood against one wall. A comfortable-looking rocking chair was in the corner. It wasn't cluttered or over-decorated. It was a space of quiet, hopeful peace. My father had assembled the crib himself. My mother had spent weeks refinishing a small antique dresser. They had been building this sanctuary in secret, a physical manifestation of their hope. I breathed, my hand going to my belly. The baby kicked a soft, insistent thump against my palm. Your father and I. We wanted it to be ready, she said, her voice thick with tears. She walked over and placed her hand next to mine on my stomach. We wanted him to have a quiet place to come home to. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a love so fierce it almost buckled my knees. I feel so guilty, Kaylin, she whispered, for what you've had to endure. For the whispers, for the way Serafina has treated you. Maybe we should have just told everyone the truth from the start." "No," I said, shaking my head firmly. "No, this way is better. This way, the truth will be a cleansing fire. It won't just be a story we tell. It will be a lesson everyone learns. It's not just about the baby anymore, Mom. It's about correcting the record. It's about ending the lies for good. Few months of being misunderstood is a small price to pay for a lifetime of peace and honesty for our family." "For this family," I said, looking from her face to the crib and back again. She nodded, understanding. "You are stronger than any of us," she said. Later that evening, she helped me choose my dress for the party. We settled on a deep emerald green silk dress. It was elegant, simple, and beautifully cut. It didn't try to hide my pregnancy. It framed it, celebrated it. It was a statement. I was not ashamed. I was not hiding. I was waiting. The night of the party was a blur of crystal and champagne. The low murmur of 200 guests filling the grand ballroom of the country club. My parents had spared no expense. It was a beautiful, elegant affair, a testament to their 35 years of quiet devotion. It was also a battlefield. I arrived with them, my hand linked through my father's arm. Our entrance caused a ripple in the fabric of the party. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. I felt the collective gaze of the entire extended family land on me, on my very visible, very pregnant form. I moved through the room with my head held high, my green dress a banner of defiance. I smiled. I accepted congratulations for my parents. I was a vision of serene, untouchable calm. Serafina, dressed in a stunning backless silver gown, was in her element. She moved through the crowd like a queen, accepting praise for having organized such a beautiful event for our parents. And she never strayed far from me. She would appear at my elbow, a proprietary hand on my arm. "Kaylin, are you feeling all right? Can I get you some water?" she would ask, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear her loving concern. "I'm fine, thank you, Sira," I would reply with a gentle smile. "You must be exhausted." "Carrying all that weight around," she'd say, gesturing to my belly with a sympathetic pout. "Make sure you sit down if you feel faint." Every interaction was a public performance. She was the caretaker, I was the fragile, pitiable burden. I allowed her to play her part, sipping my water, knowing that with every word, she was climbing higher onto her pedestal, making my job that much easier. After dinner, the toasts began. My father's business partner gave a warm, funny speech. My Aunt Carol shared a tearful anecdote. The mood was loving, celebratory. Then Serafina made her way to the stage, a microphone in her hand. She glowed under the spotlight. This was her moment. "I'd like to say a few words," she began, her voice resonating through the ballroom. "Not just about my wonderful parents and their incredible marriage, but about the nature of family itself." Her eyes found me in the crowd, and she gave me a small, sad, encouraging smile. I knew what was coming. This was about to deliver the coup de grace. It's a final, definitive chapter in the story of her compassionate heroism. She was going to talk about me. It's about the newest addition to the family. It's about how our family, under her loving guidance, had rallied around a sister in need. "Family," she continued, her voice thick with emotion, "is about unconditional love. It's about supporting each other, even when people make unexpected choices. It's about embracing the future, no matter what shape it takes." Was building to her grand reveal, her public embrace of my shameful secret. The entire room was hanging on her every word, but as she took a breath to continue, another figure began moving towards the stage. It was my father. He walked with a purpose I had never seen in him before. A microphone already in his hand, which he must have gotten from the band leader. He was not going to let Serafina finish. He was not going to let her control the narrative for 1 second longer. He reached the stage and stood beside her. He took the microphone from its stand. Serafina looked at him, confused, her planned speech dying on her lips. My father looked out at the 200 guests, his expression calm, his back straight. His eyes found mine in the crowd, and he gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. The waiting was over. The finale was about to begin. My father stood, and a hush fell over the 200 guests. He was not a man who sought the spotlight. His quiet strength was the bedrock of our family, but his voice was rarely heard above the din of a party. His movement to the stage was an event in itself, a silent, powerful claim on the narrative. Serafina froze, the microphone held loosely in her hand, her planned speech dying on her lips. She looked at him with a flicker of annoyance, which quickly morphed into confusion as he took the second microphone from its stand. "Thank you. Everyone," my father began, his voice calm and steady, resonating with a deep paternal authority that instantly commanded the room. He smiled warmly. "Thank you for being here to celebrate 35 years with my incredible wife. I am the luckiest man in the world." He looked at my mother, and the love that passed between them was a tangible thing, a quiet light that filled the room. He then turned his gaze slightly to Serafina. "My daughter Serafina was just speaking about the nature of family," he said, his tone even. "And she is right. Family is about unconditional love. It is about supporting each other through difficult times. And more than anything, it is about sacrifice." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And tonight, on this very special occasion, my wife and I have a story we wish to share. A story about the greatest act of love and the most profound sacrifice we have ever had the privilege to witness." His eyes left Serafina and found me in the crowd. They were shining with tears, but also with a fierce, brilliant pride. The entire room followed his gaze. I became the focal point, the axis upon which the entire evening was about to turn. "For 20 years, my father continued, his voice growing thick with an emotion he had hidden from the world for decades. "As many of you know, my wife, my beautiful Anne, and I, we struggled. We prayed for another child. We endured years of painful treatments, of hopes raised and hopes shattered. We grieved in private. And eventually we accepted that it was a dream that would not come true." A deep, empathetic silence held the room captive. People who had known my parents for 40 years were hearing the true depth of their private sorrow for the first time. "We were wrong," my father said, his voice cracking for just a moment before he regained his composure. "We were wrong, because we had not accounted for the extraordinary heart of our daughter, Kaylin." He looked directly at me. 6 months ago, Kaylin came to us and, in an act of generosity so profound that I still struggled to comprehend it, she gave us the greatest gift a child could ever give her parents. She offered to carry our child for us, to be our surrogate, to give her mother and me the son we had mourned for 2 decades. A collective gasp went through the room, sound like the wind being knocked out of 200 people at once. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. I watched as the narrative that had been built around me for months, the story of the shameful secret, the mysterious lover, the tragic mistake was not just corrected, but obliterated. Vaporized in a single stunning paragraph, my father's voice rose, filled with a strength and joy I had never heard before. "So, you see, the baby Kaylin is carrying is not her secret. It is our son, her brother, and our miracle." He then turned to Serafina. Her face was a mask of chalk-white horror. She looked as if the stage beneath her feet had dissolved into smoke. The adoring crowd she had been playing to moments before was now staring at her with a new, dawning, terrible understanding. My father extended his hand to me. "Kaylin," he said, his voice ringing with love. "Would you join us?" I stood up, my legs feeling strangely steady. I walked towards the stage, moving through a sea of stunned faces. The looks of pity were gone, replaced by something I could only describe as awe. I took my father's hand and stepped up onto the stage beside him and my mother, who had come up from her seat, her face wet with tears of relief and love. And then I turned to the microphone. I had to finish it. My voice was quiet, but the room was so silent that every word landed with the force of a physical blow. My sister was right about one thing. I began looking out at the crowd, but seeing only her. I have been carrying a secret. A secret I was bound by love and a promise to my parents to keep. But while I was carrying their hope, Serafina has been telling her own story to all of you. A story about my shame, my recklessness, my irresponsibility. A story where she was the brave, compassionate hero, and I was the broken tragedy she needed to save. I paused, turning my head to look directly at her. She was frozen, trapped in the spotlight she had so desperately craved. Every word of that story was a lie. I said, my voice clinical and precise, not just factually, but emotionally. Because it was a lie born of a profound lack of faith in her own sister. She never once came to me and asked, Kaylin, how can I help you? She only ever asked Kaylin, what have you done? She saw a situation she did not understand, and she chose to believe the ugliest, most sordid version of the truth. Because that version was the most dramatic, because it gave her the starring role, because she would rather believe her. Sister was a disgrace and believed she was capable of a selfless act. My parents and I came together then, a small, tight circle of three on the stage, a fortress of truth. So tonight I finished, my voice ringing with a final, quiet finality. We celebrate my parents' 35 years of love. And we celebrate the future of our family. My secret is that I have the most wonderful parents in the world, and soon they will have the son they have waited their whole lives for. Seraphine's secret, now for all of you to see. I did not have to say what it was. The character, her motive, her vicious, self-serving cruelty was all laid bare. I set down the microphone. My father put his arm around me. My mother took my hand, and in that moment the applause began. It was not the polite applause of a party. It was a thunderous, rolling ovation. It was an apology. It was an acknowledgement. It was a wave of love and respect that washed over the three of us, cleansing the stain of the past few months completely. Serafina stood alone. Outside our circle, the applause a deafening roar of her own public humiliation. The pity she had so expertly cultivated for me had transformed and found its rightful target. She looked at our family, at the loving, unbreakable unit on stage, and she finally understood that there was no place for her inside it. She turned, her beautiful silver dress catching the light, and she fled. She pushed her way through the stunned crowd and ran from the ballroom, vanquished by a truth she never bothered to seek. We didn't stay to enjoy the victory. The truth had been told, the record corrected. That was all that mattered. Tess found us in the chaos and helped us slip out a side door, away from the relatives who were now clamoring to offer their stunned apologies and congratulations. In the car on the way home, a comfortable, peaceful silence filled the space. Was the silence of a battle won? Of a fever broken? My mother held my hand the entire way. My father drove, and I could see his reflection in the rearview mirror. He was smiling. The next morning, my phone, which had been a source of anxiety for months, was now filled with a different kind of message. Long emotional texts from my cousins. Kaylin, I am so sorry for how I treated you. What you're doing is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Voicemails from my aunts, their voices thick with tears. We had no idea. We love you. We're so proud of you. And there was one text from an unknown number. I knew it was Serafina. It was a long, rambling paragraph of self-pity, a tangled mess of half-apologies and bitter accusations. You had no right to humiliate me like that. I was only trying to help. How could I have known? You let me believe it. You made me look like a monster. She still didn't understand. She saw my silence not as a promise I was keeping to our parents, but as a trap I had set for her. Her narcissism was a fortress no truth could penetrate. I read the message, felt the faint, vestigial ghost of an old sorrow, and then I deleted it. I blocked the number. She was no longer my problem. Later that day, I was at my parents' house. We were in the new nursery unpacking the gifts from the disastrous baby shower. The items now imbued with a new, joyful meaning. We were laughing, My father struggling with the assembly instructions for a baby swing when the doorbell rang. It was a floral delivery. A massive, breathtaking arrangement of white orchids and green hydrangeas. My father brought it in, his brow furrowed as he looked at the card. "Who are the Chens and the Albrights?" he asked. I smiled, a small, private joke with the universe. Old friends of the family and the two board members who had stood by me in another life. Another war. I took the card. The message was simple. "Congratulations on the future of your family. A legacy of love is the only one that matters." Stood there holding the card, surrounded by my parents' quiet joy, the sunlight streaming through the nursery window. The public battle was over. The private peace was just beginning. The future was bright and clear. My revenge was complete, and the end result was not destruction, but a beautiful, hard-won peace. The aftermath of the party was like the quiet that follows a storm. The air was clean, the sky was bright, and the world felt scrubbed new. Space of a single 10-minute speech, my entire social reality had been inverted. I was no longer Kaylin, the tragic, secretive spinster. I was St. Kaylin, the vessel of our family's miracle. A figure of profound and slightly terrifying sacrifice. The phone calls and text messages, which I had once dreaded, continued unabated. But their content had changed completely. The cloying pity was replaced by a fawning, almost frantic admiration. My aunts now called not to offer unsolicited advice, but to ask in hushed, reverent tones how I was feeling, as if my well-being were a matter of holy importance. My cousins, who had once looked at me with morbid curiosity, now invited me to lunch with a nervous deference. Desperate to be seen in proximity to my newfound grace, I found this new role almost as isolating as the old one. They had not seen me before, and they did not see me now. They had simply replaced one caricature with another. They weren't trying to understand my journey. They were trying to absolve themselves of their guilt for having so readily believed Seraphine's vicious narrative. My forgiveness, which I gave freely and with a detached sense of amusement, was a gift they seemed to need far more than I needed to give it. "You've gone from Hester Prynne to the Virgin Mary in one night," Tess observed dryly over coffee. "One afternoon, it must be exhausting." "It's a different kind of exhausting," I admitted. Before, I felt like I was under a microscope of judgment. Now I feel like I'm a museum piece under glass. Everyone is afraid to touch me for fear I might break. They talk to my belly more than they talk to me. "Well," Tess said with a smirk, "your belly is carrying the heir to the Renault family dynasty. It's practically a celebrity in its own right." I laughed, a real easy laugh. It was a sound I was getting reacquainted with. With the public truth restored, a massive weight had been lifted. The constant, draining effort of maintaining a lie was gone. I could finally just be pregnant. My pregnancy. My parents' pregnancy. Our strange, beautiful, complicated project. And I could focus on the final, most important phase, getting this little boy safely into the arms of his parents. The family's Cold War with Serafina was swift and brutal. In the wake of the party, she became a pariah. The aunts and uncles who had once hung on her every word now met her with stony silence. Her social invitations dried up. Her power, which had been built on a foundation of charm, gossip, and perceived moral authority, had been based on a fraudulent prospectus. When the truth came out, her social stock crashed completely. I learned from my Aunt Carol, the family's most notorious gossip, now seeking to get back in my good graces, that my father had enacted his own quiet, devastating revenge. He had cut Serafina off financially. Her car, her penthouse apartment, her platinum credit card doll were privileges funded by a family trust controlled by my father. And with a few quiet phone calls, he had turned off the tap. Her life of decadent ease, a life she believed was her birthright, was over my time, meanwhile became centered around my mother. With the secret out, she was finally free to be what she had longed to be for 20 years, an expectant mother. She fussed over me with a joy that was incandescent. She cooked for me, bringing over elaborate, nutritious meals she had researched. She would sit with me for hours, not saying much, just knitting a tiny blue sweater, her hands finally having a tangible object for all her pent-up maternal love. We went shopping together for the last few items for the nursery. We walked through the aisles of a baby store, and for the first time it felt right. There were no secrets, no sideways glances. We were just two women, a mother and a daughter, preparing for the arrival of a beloved child. I was so angry at her, my mother confessed one afternoon as we stood in the nursery, folding tiny onesies and placing them in the dresser my father had so lovingly restored. For weeks after that party, my anger at Serafina was so hot I felt like it was going to burn me up from the inside. How could a daughter of mine be so cruel, so blind? She sees what she wants to see. Mom, I said quietly. But now, she continued, her voice softening, now I just feel sad for her. To live in a world where you can't imagine an act of love, where the only story you can invent is an ugly one. What a small, dark place that must be to live in. Looked at my mother, at her boundless capacity for empathy, even for the daughter who had hurt her so profoundly, and I felt a fresh wave of love for her. This was why I was doing this. For her goodness, for her light. Seraphine's attempt at a reconciliation came on a Sunday, 5 weeks after the party. She didn't call. She simply appeared at my parents' front door just as we were sitting down to dinner. My father opened the door and his face, which had been relaxed and happy moments before, hardened into a mask of cold indifference. "Serafina," he said. His voice was flat. She looked terrible. The confident, glowing woman from the party was gone. She was thin, pale, her expensive clothes looking slightly rumpled. She had been stripped of her power, and it showed. "Dad, can I please come in?" she asked, her voice small. "I need to talk to you. To all of you." My father stood aside without a word and let her pass. She walked into the dining room and stood there wringing her hands, a pariah in her own family home. My mother looked at her, her face a canvas of conflicted sorrow. I remained seated, my hands resting on my belly, and waited. "She began, her eyes filling with tears. This time they looked real. "I am so sorry." The words hung in the air. "I was wrong," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I was so wrong. I was jealous of you, Kaylin. I've always been jealous. You were always so self-sufficient, so calm, never seemed to need anyone. And when I saw you, when I thought you were in trouble, a part of me was happy about it, because it meant you would finally need me. It made me feel important, powerful." It was the most honest thing I had ever heard her say. "I invented a story," she continued, her voice cracking. "I invented the ugliest story. I could because it made me the hero. And I didn't stop to think about how it would hurt you. Or you," she said, looking at our parents. "I just wanted it to be about me. I am so sorry for the pain I caused, for the humiliation, for everything." She stood there, weeping, awaiting her verdict. My father spoke first, his voice like chipping stone. "Your apology is noted, Serafina, but your actions have consequences. You betrayed the trust of this entire family. You publicly humiliated your sister, who was engaged in the single most selfless act I have ever witnessed." My mother added, her voice soft but firm, "We love you, Sira, you are our daughter, but we are profoundly disappointed in you. The person you showed us these past few months is not someone I am proud of." Then they both looked at me. It was my decision. I was the one who had been wronged. I held all the power. I looked at my sister, at this broken, hollowed-out version of the confident woman she had once been. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel pity. I felt a deep, weary sadness. "I hear your words, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet but clear. But an apology doesn't fix what you broke. You have to understand that. You didn't just tell a lie. You chose to believe the absolute worst of me without question because it served your ego. That kind of breach can't be healed with one conversation. Trust isn't a switch you can just flip back on. She looked at me, her eyes begging for absolution. I would not give it to her. Not yet. If you truly want to be a part of this family again, I said, then you have to earn it. It will be a long and quiet process. It will involve you learning to listen instead of perform. It will involve you putting someone else's needs before your own for the first time in your life. The path back is here. But you are the only one who can walk it. I offered no hug, no easy forgiveness. I offered only a difficult, uncertain future. It was the kindest thing I could do. The final weeks of my pregnancy passed in a state of peaceful, heavy anticipation. My body felt slow, cumbersome, a vessel nearing its final port of call. I spent most of my time at my parents' house, resting in the quiet sanctuary of the nursery, a book in my lap, my hand on my belly, feeling the strong, steady kicks of the little person within. My father would come in and sit with me, not talking much, but just being present. He would bring me a glass of water or adjust a pillow behind my back. His quiet, constant acts of service were his love language, his way of expressing a gratitude so immense that words could not contain it. I thought a lot about the moment to come. The moment I would have to hand him over was a strange, abstract concept, a feeling I couldn't quite grasp, a joy and a sorrow, a meeting and a goodbye, all tangled up together. I had no map for this part of the journey. One Thursday evening, I was at my own apartment, enjoying the quiet solitude. I was on the phone with Tess, laughing about something mundane. And then I felt it. It started as a low, dull ache in my back, which then wrapped around my abdomen in a tight, insistent grip. I stopped talking mid-sentence. "Kaylin, you okay?" Tess asked. I took a slow, deep breath as the sensation peaked and then began to subside. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I'm okay." We talked for a few more minutes, and then it came again, stronger this time. Unmistakable. I hung up the phone, stood and walked over to the clock on the wall, my analytical mind kicking in, overriding everything else. I noted the time. I waited. 7 minutes later, it came again. I walked to the front door where my hospital bag had been packed and waiting for 2 weeks. I placed a hand on my belly. It was hard as a rock. My heart was calm. My breathing was even. The long wait was over. The project was reaching its final, most important deliverable. I picked up my phone, didn't call for an ambulance, didn't call Tess. I made the one call that mattered. My mother answered on the first ring. "Hello, sweetheart." "Mom," I said, my voice perfectly steady, perfectly controlled. "It's time. Can you and Dad come and get me?" The first contraction was a quiet announcement, a tightening low in my back that was more interesting than painful. I noted the time, 8:17 p. I was sitting in my favorite armchair reading a book on Byzantine architecture. The second one, 7 minutes later, was more insistent. It wrapped around my abdomen like a thick, muscular rope and squeezed. It was a powerful, primal sensation that commanded my full attention. There was no pain, not yet, just an undeniable, awesome pressure. The book lay forgotten in my lap. The abstract world of history had been replaced by the visceral, immediate reality of my own body. My phone call to my mother was a masterpiece of my own particular brand of calm. There was no panic in my voice. There was no fear. There was only the simple, clear transmission of data. "Mom," I had said, my voice perfectly steady as I breathed through the end of another contraction. "It's time. Can you and Dad come and get me?" The 20 minutes it took for them to arrive were a strange, suspended period of peace. I moved through my apartment with a deliberate grace, a strange weightlessness despite my heavy belly. I brushed my teeth, pulled my hair back into a neat, functional braid. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were wide and dark, my face pale. But I looked. Ready? I looked like a soldier on the morning of a battle she had trained for her entire life. When my parents arrived, their faces were a study in loving anxiety. My mother rushed to my side, her hands fluttering, not knowing where to land. My father, his face grim with a kind of stoic terror, simply took my hospital bag from my hand. His knuckles were white. Was a man preparing to watch his child walk through fire. The drive to the hospital was a surreal journey through a sleeping city. The streets were dark and empty, the traffic lights blinking yellow into the void. Inside the car, a universe of feeling was contained in the silence. My mother sat in the back with me, holding my hand, her presence a warm, steady anchor. I closed my eyes and focused on the rhythm of my body, a rhythm that was no longer my own. The contractions were coming closer now, stronger, each one a wave I had to ride, a mountain I had to climb and then descend. I analyzed the sensation with a detached curiosity. It began as a deep pull, then a gathering, coiling power, peaking, in a breathtaking, all-consuming clench, and then a slow, blessed release. It was terrifying, was magnificent. The labor and delivery ward was an oasis of calm professionalism in the dead of night. The nurses greeted us with warm, knowing smiles. My file was ready. They knew our story, the surrogacy, the unique family dynamic. There were no surprised looks, no awkward questions, just a quiet, confident respect that I was profoundly grateful for. They settled me into a private delivery room, with a large, softly lit space filled with the quiet, rhythmic beating of the fetal heart monitor. That steady, galloping sound thump, 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 thump became the soundtrack to our long night. It was the sound of hope, the sound of the future. The hours that followed were a blur of sensation, a long, slow descent into a primal state I had never known. My carefully constructed world of analysis and detachment began to crumble under the relentless, overwhelming force of labor. The pain, when it truly arrived, was a revelation. It was not a simple sensation. It was a living thing. It had a color, a texture, a voice. It consumed everything. My mother was my rock. She never left my side. She held a cool cloth to my forehead. She whispered encouragement into my ear when my own resolve faltered. She breathed with me, her presence a constant, loving metronome in the swirling chaos of the pain. She was not the expectant grandmother. She was simply a mother, caring for her daughter through an ancient and agonizing rite of passage. My father was a silent, stoic sentinel by the door. He would pace the hallway outside, then reappear, his face etched with a love so fierce and so helpless it broke my heart. He would bring my mother coffee. He would offer me ice chips. He was a man of action rendered powerless, and his quiet, steadfast presence was its own form of strength. At some point, Tess arrived. She slipped into the room like a ghost, her face full of a grounded, reassuring calm. She hugged my parents, then came to my bedside. "Hey, superhero," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Heard you were staging a dramatic entrance. It's a bit more than I bargained for." I gasped as another wave began to build. "You've got this, Kaylin," she said, her grip firm. "You're the strongest person I know." She didn't stay long. She was just there to bear witness, to be my tether to the outside world. A reminder of the life that was waiting for me after this was all over. Her brief visit was a gift. As dawn began to break, casting a pale gray light into the room, things began to escalate. The pain was no longer a series of waves. It was a single, endless ocean, and I was drowning in it. My analytical mind, my last defense, shattered. There was no more observing. There was no more detaching. There was only the raw animal reality of what was happening. My body was a force of nature, and I was merely its vessel. "You're almost there, Kalan." The doctor's calm voice cut through. "The haze. You're ready. It's time to push." What followed was the hardest work of my life. It was an hour or an eternity of pure, focused, agonizing effort. Every muscle in my body screamed. My vision blurred. The only things that were real were the encouraging voice of my mother, the steady presence of my father by the wall, and the doctor's calm instructions. And then, in a final, monumental, world-splitting effort, it happened. A release. A sudden, shocking emptiness. Yeah. And then, a new sound. A sound that cut through the exhaustion and the pain and filled the entire universe. The sound of a baby's cry. It was a strong, healthy, furious wail. A declaration of existence. I am here. A sob of pure, unadulterated joy escaped my mother's lips. I saw my father lean his head against the wall, his shoulders shaking. I fell back against the pillows, my body a trembling, empty vessel, my breath coming in ragged, grateful gasps. A nurse, her face a blur of smiling kindness, gently cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a warm blanket. She brought the small, squirming bundle and placed him on my chest. He was so warm, so heavy. His tiny, wrinkled face was screwed up in a furious frown, his mouth open in a silent cry. He smelled of everything new. I looked down at this perfect, tiny person, this life I had carried and protected for 9 months. And the feeling that washed over me was not the one I had expected. It wasn't the feeling of a mother meeting her son. It was the profound, earth-shattering feeling of meeting my brother for the first time. Was the feeling of a promise fulfilled, of a gift finally delivered. I held him for a moment, my heart overflowing with a strange and wonderful love. Then I looked up at my parents. They were standing by the bed, their faces transfigured by a joy so pure and so powerful, it was almost painful to witness. They were not looking at me, they were looking at their son. The son they had grieved for 20 years. The nurse gently took the baby to swaddle him properly. After a moment, she turned to me. "Are you ready, dear?" I knew what she was asking. I nodded, my throat tight. I looked at my mother. "Mom," I whispered, my voice raw. "He's here. He's yours." The nurse walked a few steps across the room and gently placed the swaddled baby into my mother's waiting arms. My mother let out a soft, choked cry as she held her son for the first time. She brought him to her face, her tears falling onto his soft blanket, whispering his name over and over again. "Thomas. Oh, Thomas, my sweet boy." My father came and wrapped his arms around both of them, his own face a mask of unbelievable, tear-streaked joy. He buried his face in my mother's hair, his hand resting on his son's tiny head. They were a perfect, complete circle of love. A family finally whole. I lay back against the pillows, every muscle in my body aching, my heart full to the point of breaking. I watched them. I watched my family be reborn. And I felt a sense of peace so deep, so absolute. It was the most profound thing I had ever experienced. The pain, the secrecy, the public humiliation, it had all been worth it. 1,000 times over. The project was complete. My work was done. Hours later, I was resting in the quiet of my private recovery room. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. My parents were there, sitting in armchairs, taking turns holding their son. They were quiet, content, their faces illuminated by the soft light of the lamp and the brighter light of their own happiness. They had named him Thomas after my paternal grandfather. Thomas Renaud. It was a good, strong name. The peace was so complete. It felt sacred. And then there was a soft knock on the door. A nurse poked her head in, her expression apologetic. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry to disturb you. But there's Amie Serafina Renaud here. She's at the nurse's station. She says she's your sister and she's asking to see you." The air in the room instantly chilled. The peaceful tableau was shattered. My mother's happy expression tightened into one of pained anxiety. My father's face became a stony, protective mask. I looked from their faces to the sleeping baby in my mother's arms. This room was a sanctuary, a holy place, and I would not allow it to be defiled by drama or false apologies. Not today. I closed my eyes for a brief second, gathering my strength. Then I looked at the nurse. My voice was a quiet whisper, but it was as firm and as final as a closing door. "Tell her." "No," I said. "Not today." I paused and then added one more thing, for clarity. For the final, undeniable truth of it all. Today is for family. My homecoming was nothing like I had imagined. For 9 months, I had mentally prepared myself for the quiet solitude of my own apartment after the birth, for the strange, hollow silence after being the center of so much life. But my parents would not allow it. "You are not going home to an empty apartment," my mother had declared in the hospital room, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You are coming home with us, with your brother. I need to take care of my daughter." And so I found myself back in my childhood bedroom, a space I hadn't occupied for more than a night in over a decade. But the house was not the house. I had grown up in a heavy, sorrowful silence I associated with the place had vanished, completely and utterly. It had been replaced by a symphony of new sounds. The soft, milky sighs of a sleeping newborn. The gentle, rhythmic creak of the rocking chair in the nursery down the hall. The low, happy murmur of my father's voice as he spoke nonsense to his son. For the first time in my memory, my parents' house felt truly, vibrantly alive. The first few weeks passed in a slow, peaceful blur of recovery. My body, which had felt like a public project for so long, was finally my own again. I felt sore, exhausted, and profoundly, deeply at peace. My role in this new world was a strange and beautiful one. I was an observer, the revered architect of this new family dynamic. I would sit in a comfortable armchair in the living room, a cup of tea in my hands, and I would just watch. I watched my mother, a woman reborn. The weariness that had settled deep in her bones over the years was gone, replaced by a radiant, fierce energy. She moved with a purpose I had never seen. Her love for her new son, a tangible force in every movement. I watched my father, a quiet man, become utterly undone by his love for his child. I would see him standing over the crib in the middle of deer. The night, his large calloused hand resting gently on his son's tiny back. His face a portrait of pure, unadulterated awe. This new world was perfect. It was exactly what I had wanted, what I had endured everything for. And yet I felt a strange and poignant detachment from it. I was the creator of this joy, but I was not at its center. I was a beloved, honored guest in a life that was not. Mine. Tess, my anchor to reality, came to visit me at my parents' house. We sat in the blooming garden my father had started tending again with a fierce devotion. "It's strange, isn't it?" I confessed to her, my voice low. "Everything I wanted to happen has happened. It's perfect, but I feel adjacent to it all. I'm his sister, but I'm also the vessel that brought him here. I don't know what my title is in this new story." Tess looked at me, her expression serious. "You're Kalon," she said simply. "You're the foundation. The one who saw a crack in the family and, instead of letting it crumble, decided to rebuild the whole damn thing stronger than before. That's your title." Her words were a gift. They helped me place myself in the new narrative, not as a strange anomaly, but as the architect. The one who had made it all possible, Serafina, was a ghost. After being turned away from the hospital, she vanished. The family, still reeling from the public revelation, closed ranks. Her name was not mentioned. The silence from her was absolute. I knew from my Aunt Carol that my father had followed through on his threat. Sarah's access to the family trust had been suspended indefinitely. She was, for the first time in her life, truly on her own. 3 weeks after Thomas was born, a letter arrived addressed to me at my parents' house. The handwriting on the envelope was hers. I opened it with a sense of detached curiosity. I expected more excuses, more self-pity. But the letter was not what I expected. It was 4 pages long, written in a messy, tear-blotched script. It was a raw, painful, and unflinching confession. She wrote about her jealousy, a poison she had been sipping her entire life. She wrote about her profound insecurity, her desperate need to be the center of every story. She wrote about the moment on the stage at the party. It's the horror of seeing the truth, of realizing the depth of her own monstrous miscalculation. "I didn't just lie about you, Kaylin," she wrote. I built a world out of lies because I was too small to live in the real one. I saw you doing something brave and beautiful, and my first instinct was to believe it was something ugly and shameful. And I have to live with that. I have to live with the knowledge that I tried to destroy the most beautiful gift our family has ever been given." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for anything. The letter ended with a single, stunning admission. "I have started seeing a therapist. I have a lot of work to do. I know that. I don't expect to be a part of your lives again. I just wanted you to know that I know the truth now. The truth about the baby and the truth about myself." I showed the letter to my parents. My father read it, his expression grim and unchanged. For him, the betrayal was a wound that would not easily heal. But my mother wept. Not for the pain Sarah had caused, but for the pain she was clearly in. A glimmer of hope for her lost daughter. I said nothing. I folded the letter and put it away. As I had told her, the path back was long, and she had only just taken the first step. Words were not enough. Time passed. The seasons turned. I moved back to my own apartment. My body healed. My spirit settled. Thomas grew from a sleepy newborn into a gurgling, happy baby with my father's eyes and my mother's smile. My life found a new, wonderful rhythm. I was Auntie Kaylin, a title I wore with a deep and quiet pride. I would spend weekends at my parents' house, not as a patient but as a beloved sister, watching my little brother discover the world. The joy in that house was a constant, radiant warmth. I heard whispers of Seraphine's new life. She had moved into a small apartment across town. She had gotten a real job working as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit. She was paying her own bills. She was living a quiet, anonymous life, stripped of all the glamour she had once craved. She never called. She never showed up unannounced. She sent a small, thoughtful gift for Thomas every month, a book. A soft toy delivered by mail, with a simple, unsigned card. She was respecting the boundaries. She was doing the work. When Thomas's first birthday arrived, my mother approached me, her face nervous. "I would like to invite her, Kaylin," she said, "to the party. Just for a little while. I want both my daughters to be here to celebrate my son." I looked at my mother, at her hopeful, loving face. "Okay, Mom," I said. "It's time." The party was a small affair. Just my parents, me, Tess, and my partner Mark. We were in the backyard under the shade of the old oak tree. The garden was in full bloom. Serafina arrived on time. She was different. The expensive, flashy clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She looked quieter. Humbled, she brought with her a single, beautifully illustrated children's book. She walked over to me first, her eyes filled with a nervous uncertainty. "Thank you for letting me come," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm glad you're here, Sarah," I said. And I meant it. She then walked over to the playmat where Thomas was happily smashing a wooden block. She didn't scoop him up. She didn't force an interaction. She knelt down beside him, a respectful distance away, and simply watched him. After a moment, she gently rolled a soft ball towards him. He giggled and grabbed for it. She looked up at me, a real, fragile, hopeful smile on her face, and I smiled back. It was not a smile of triumph or forgiveness. It was a smile of acknowledgement. A beginning. A year later, on a warm summer afternoon, we were all in the backyard again. Thomas, now a sturdy, laughing 2-year-old, was chasing bubbles across the lawn, my father running gleefully after him. My mother sat on the patio, watching them. her face a picture of pure contentment. Mark was there, his hand resting comfortably on my knee and on the chair beside me, talking quietly with Tess about a new hiking trail, was Serafina. She was still quiet, still careful, but the brittle, anxious energy was gone, replaced by a soft, genuine peace. She was a part of the family again, but her place in it was new. It was a place she had earned, not one she had demanded. I looked at the scene before me. My parents, their lifelong grief transformed into unadulterated joy. My little brother, a miracle of science and love, his laughter echoing through the garden. My sister, broken and rebuilt into someone better. Someone real. The memory of the pain, the lies, the public humiliation, it all felt like a story about someone else, a lifetime ago. The revenge I had so carefully plotted had not been about destruction, after all. The lies had to be exposed, yes. The pedestal had to be kicked over. But the true victory was not in Seraphine's fall. It was in this quiet, ordinary, beautiful afternoon. My gift had not just been a baby. It was the gift of a second chance for all of us. A new, better, more honest family, rebuilt from the ashes of the old one. The project was finished. The final report was a success, and the result was more magnificent than I could have ever designed.